everybody. It is 1:30 p.m. on Tuesday, February 7th, 2023. You are at a Wausau Waterworks Commission meeting at City Hall. Thanks for joining us. The first item on our agenda is to approve the minutes of our January 9th, 2023 meeting. I would entertain a motion. I have a motion by Alder Herbst and a second by Commissioner Robinson. Any corrections? Yes.
I did misspeak a little bit in the report on utility operations for the director's report. When I was referring to our PFAS, PFOA, I said non-detect. We actually did have some detects, but they were below the method reporting limit, which is essentially a number that's non-quantifiable. So I misspoke. It's not a non-detect, it's just below the reporting limit.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Robinson?
What was the level of detection or was it level of quantification or detection?
The result that they reported, which is below the level of quantification, was 2.18. And for PFOS was less than 0.41 parts per trillion.
Thank you.
We did just receive our new results from the samples that we did send in last month. We are at a combined level of 8.9 and 9.9 for those results.
Mr. Robinson?
Maybe I'll save the question for the director's report because we're on the minutes.
Yes, thank you. Anything on the minutes? All right, otherwise, all of those in favor of approving the minutes as updated can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. We are on to item number 2, the director's report. I will pass it over to you, Eric.
Yeah, so if any of the commissioners have any specific questions on what was reported, happy to answer any questions. A lot of this is items that we're working on, moving forward with, and we'll keep the commission informed as we get additional information on these items. I think Ben might have an update on the dryer too, at the wastewater.
Sure. We're getting closer on track to where we want to be with the Class A production. Just a couple little hiccups with the temperatures at this point with the startup and shutdown of the equipment. So we're trying to work out the bugs yet. Met with the DNR yesterday and he praised us for a job well done. We're almost there.
Okay.
So working on the sludge management program. He went through that with us. We submitted that last week in January. So he reviewed that, gave us some insight what information he would like additional to it. So we're almost there as well. So.
Okay, I know that Mr. Robinson has a question.
But just following up with Scott, so we're at, the two samples were 8.9, 9.9 for PFOA, PFAS?
Combined. PFOA and PFAS combined.
So are we concerned about breakthrough on the ionic exchange or resin? And are we tracking that? Because I think there's a limited capacity, and I think based on the bench scale study, it looked like 120, 150 days. Are we at all concerned about that, and how are we addressing that?
We're just starting our tracking now. So referring back to the pilot study, we did have varying numbers off of our results dependent upon our backwash cycles. So we're just trying to put that information together. We're not actually required to test for PFOA, PFAS again until the next quarter. But that would be one question I would ask the commission on what their thoughts might be as far as consistency or a time frame in between testing that they would be comfortable with. The tests are about $500 a piece. So.
If you felt like weighing in
Well,
or following up.
I had a question in the hall as I was coming into the meeting from somebody I knew about whether it was safe, and I said we're below any regulatory standard developed by DNR or DHS. And I think the concern with the ion exchange is that we have that potential for breakthrough. Where are we in the volumes running over the resin in terms of its life? I think we estimate, you estimated so many gallons, therefore so many days. Do you know where we are?
In the actual life of the resin in each vessel itself?
Yes.
I don't have that calculated. We were looking at, the pilot study showed about 9 months. I expect we're going to be a little less than that. We're probably 2 regens into each vessel, which is about 50 million gallons. So we do have some time left, but I can bring back more direct numbers.
I think we would need that in order to give you the answer that you're looking for in the frequency of the sampling. I think we want to be as protective as we can be, and if that requires, instead of monthly, every 2 weeks, or if we're seeing trends, if we're seeing a trend toward, going up, I think we might want to, be more flexible.
Yeah, and my concern is we've only been operating for about a month, so we're not going to have very
Right.
much for trending.
But you've been running it through the beds before we were discharging it to the system.
Yes, but that was intermittent in between plant repairs, so we don't really have a good idea or understanding of total run times because it was intermittent and between equipment on off, and our SCADA system wasn't completely set up there yet. So we can make some estimates, but I don't think we're going to be exactly accurate.
Well, as part of perhaps at a future meeting, if we could perhaps go back and revisit those bench scale studies, look at what that breakthrough period was, look at where we are, and then we can make that decision on the frequency of the monitoring. I think that would give us a good baseline for making that decision.
We can do that.
Thank you. Mr. Force. I'm sorry, Mr. Jean. Mr. Force is here.
I thought I read someplace, and maybe it was in the minutes from last month, but I'm not sure. Have we tested anything at the wastewater for PFAS?
I believe it was in 2020, there was the DNR did one sample. They took one sample of it.
Okay.
Did Mr. Robinson?
Do we have plans going forward? I know I was at a Western Towns Association meeting there's a growing concern among farmers on spreading of biosolids in the potential impact to agricultural lands. And I think it's based upon what's going on in Maine and in Michigan, but it's only a matter of time before that concern comes here. So do we have plans for looking at our effluent? And I know that there are issues relative to monitoring of biosolids, but I think it's going to be an issue that we're going to have to come to grips with if we're looking to continue to do land application of the biosolids.
Correct. And we'll probably see some of that in the issuance of our new our discharge permit. So I'll submit the application by July 5th of this year. And at that point in time, we'll wait for the draft to come to us or be sent to us. And then we'll be able to see what requirements the DNR is going to set forth for us to follow for PFAS testing and that, the biosolids and the effluent. So,
Yeah.
Just a follow-up on that. I think that, there's a phase-in period within the new WPDS permits that the DNR is doing. I think what we'd like to do is look at that as a baseline, but then look at whether or not we as a commission would want to do anything in addition to that. I recognize it's additional workload, but I think that if it's in the biosolids and land spread, we not only have liability at the plant, but we have liability in the field potentially, and I think it would be something that we might want to be aware of. And Michigan has done a lot of work relative to the application rate that Wisconsin has adopted, but I have a feeling those numbers are going to come down.
I think that from our perspective, I would caution the commission on getting ahead of the regulations and the requirements of the DNR. They will be directing us as we move forward with our new discharge permit. and also providing us information and direction if detections are made as well. And I think right now, we're trying to manage PFAS in our drinking water, and I think that that should be our focus right now. And so I think we should take these one step at a time for our staff and focus on that. I think it is important that we consider what the DNR is proposing and keep an eye on that, and happy to bring that back to the commission for you to review and see if they're recommending anything ahead of time as well. So, yeah.
Mr. Robinson.
Just a word of caution, having spent a good portion of my career doing cost allocation for people that thought they were complying with rules and subsequently didn't, found out they didn't. There are also third-party lawsuits popping up all over, and I think it's something that we have to factor into our discussions as we look not only at what the WPDS permit requirements are, but what's the trends and the nature of the third-party actions that are modifying behavior. So it's not just the regulations that drive it, it's the concern about what others perceive is our responsibility to keep them out of the waste stream.
Right, but regulations is what we follow, so I'm happy to look at other options, so that's just my opinion.
Anyone else with questions or comments? Okay, we will go ahead and put this report on file then. Next up is our public hearing. Before we start it, maybe we could just have a quick overview of what exactly we're talking about here.
Sure. I believe it was in 2020, we had a rate case for both water and wastewater rates before the construction of our new treatment facilities, the new drinking water treatment facility and the upgrade to the wastewater. At that time, we knew that we were going to have to go in for another rate case. Ellers prepared a presentation for us, presented that, I believe, in November, with what those proposed rates they're recommending would be based on not only the upgrades, the remainder of the upgrades to pay for on the drinking water side, but also proposed capital projects as well as increased operational costs that we've seen over the last 2 to 3 years. This, as you know, the Wisconsin Public Service Commission regulates the drinking water rates, and that rate case was submitted in December to the PSC, and they're working on that now. The sewer rates are regulated locally. And so back in 2020, when we did the last rate increase for sewer, the commission asked that we establish a policy or procedure that a public hearing be held for sewer rates if they're proposed to be increased. And so based on what Ellers had proposed a couple months ago, and what is in your packet as well, they're proposing a 5% increase on the sewer side for 2023 and a 10% on the sewer side for 2024. So.
Okay, so we have agendized first the public hearing and then the comments from this body. Just a reminder, if you're here for the public hearing, nobody on this body can respond to you, but we are listening. Well, you'll just need to give your name and address for the record, and then you'll get 3 minutes. So with that, we will open up the public hearing for discussion and possible action on proposed sewer rate increases for calendar years 2023 and 2024. If anyone is here, you are welcome to approach the podium. Right. I'll call for a second time if there's anybody here who would like to discuss the proposed sewer rate increases for 2023 and 2024. You are welcome to approach the podium. I do know that we got at least one comment by email. Okay, last time, if there is anyone here who would like to comment on the proposed sewer rate increases for calendar years 2023 and 2024, you are welcome. Okay, I guess we will go ahead and close the public hearing, but we are moving on to item number 4. This is the part where the Wausau Waterworks Commission will discuss for discussion and possible action on the proposed sewer rate increases for calendar years 2023 and 2024. Mr. Robinson.
So Eric, when we look at the rates, later in the agenda, we have the proposed table of organizational chart. How many of these positions are factored into the 5 and 10% rate? I mean, I don't know if it's, who's the best one to answer? Are we? None.
Nope, on the rate increases that we did with Ellers, they didn't,
I think your mic is off.
on the rate increases that Ellers gave to us, we didn't have the study from Baker Tilly at that time, so it did not include any of those proposed staffing. And you'll see that on the spreadsheet under that item as well, John.
Yeah. So do we have, I know we haven't costed out all of those positions, and we haven't developed a formal timeline for filling those, but do we have any projected potential increase or impact on the budget for those positions? Is question one, and then question two is, are there any opportunities under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, Inflation Reduction Act, and others to minimize some of the capital costs that might more favorably impact rates?
Yeah, so on the spreadsheet that I showed you under the item with the organizational chart, it gives some estimates on some of those costs as we add those new full-time employees over time. But again, those are just estimates at this point. Positions haven't been classified and they haven't been fully vetted, which will probably be a full year, and hopefully get the first round of those into the 2024 budget. To answer your question on the bill funding, I think we've probably applied for at least a dozen projects for state fiscal year 2024 on both the water and the wastewater side for project funding in hopes to get principal forgiveness, but we won't know probably until June, July of this year whether any of that funding or any of those projects will be funded and to what amount. Also, as you know, that most of our capital projects for street on the utility side, the council approved ARPA to fund those for 2022 and 2023. So, yeah.
Any questions or comments from this body?
I will put out there as well, I mean, this is Eller's recommendation, for these, but, if you want to do them one at a time, that's up to you as well. You can approve the 5% for this year. We can hold another public hearing and another analysis towards the end of the year to see if that 10% still holds, to see what's changed. We've also had some discussions in late 2024, after the plant is fully operational for over a year, as well as the wastewater plant, to relook at our operational costs and to go in for another rate case and look at Ellers and see, after a full year of operations, where things are at as well.
Mr. Force.
My question bespeaks a little ignorance on my side, but I still have to ask it. What has our history been for sewer rate increases? My understanding when I came on this board was that we hadn't increased rates for some time, but then we began to implement smaller rate increases over a period of time. And I may be wrong in trying to recollect this, but the main question is, were we able to anticipate this 5 and then a 10% increase? And does it come on the heels of other increases that we've implemented over the last 4, 5, 6 years?
Yeah, so as you know, when we started the projects to fund the project, there were 3 rate increases for the wastewater, right? And those were stepped in over time. Ellers at that time had stated that, rates should be reviewed based on the actual cost of the projects once they're completed. This is really taking into account what is proposed for capital costs, what we've seen for increases in operational costs. So these are not These sewer rate increases are not part of our capital project, which we're on the verge of completing. These are just based on moving forward with proposed projects, so, and operations. So,
Mr. Robinson?
So, good part of last year, we spent discussing the compensation levels relative to our inability to fill positions. Have we addressed that issue, or is that, so it's an ongoing, Scott's shaking his head no, and that's what I anticipated. So we still have some potential issues relative to, if you will, playing catch-up relative to our comparables.
Correct.
From that. Do we have any projected impact that that may have on rates now or next year?
not without a wage study. No,
So
we
where
won't.
are we relative to that wage study? Do you,
HR has, I don't know if that's a full-fledged wage study or if that's just a,
We do have our HR
Adjustment.
director here.
Oh,
If
there you go.
you don't mind being off the cuff and just kind of explaining where we're at in
James.
that process. I think it's a market study, but
All right. Well, first of all, forgive me for not wearing my jacket up here, but you guys kind of got me off guard.
you look good.
Anyway, we've had our initial meeting with Gallagher, which is the company that's going to do the wage study, and right now we're really in the starting point. And I think one of the things that I spoke with them is I want to make sure that we get true comparables. I don't want them comparing us to Madison and Milwaukee because those aren't really true comparables. So we want to make sure that we compare our community with like communities, with like population, like operations, and everything like that. So we're really in the beginning stages of that. In the first part of March, I think the Gallagher's going to be a part of our director meeting, and they're going to get more input from the directors into how they want that study to go.
Mr. Robinson?
to a degree, didn't we do that relative to comparables with the Baker-Tilly study? So do we need to spend a lot of time on defining the comparables if we've already sort of established a baseline based upon the Baker-Tilly, or are they apples and oranges?
At this point, I think right now, when you look at expertise, I think the Gallagher study's probably going to be a little closer to having more expertise than the Baker-Tilly study. If you guys are familiar with Baker-Tilly, they're basically, and first and foremost, a recruitment firm. We want to just make sure that we are comparing apples to oranges. I don't want to demean them by any point because I don't have the qualifications to do that. But I know that Gallagher have a good name in this community, and I think that they will do really well with those comparables. Plus, I think with the Baker-Tilly study, I know that we weren't really involved in a lot of that. I think most of us kind of saw it when it was done. So I feel more comfortable with the study that we're doing now because it's going to be for the entire city. And I think they're taking the input from all of the directors and everyone as to how that takes shape.
Mr. Robinson?
I guess I'm going to throw out a comment and then we can maybe discuss it. I'm comfortable with going with the 2023 rate. I'm a little bit concerned about going into 2024 without better clarification of some of the unknowns, including this study. I don't want to tie our hands going forward, and I think that we have some critical issues that we need to perhaps reserve some time to discuss is how it might affect rates in the future, and there may be other opportunities for funding that may drive down some of our capital side. But I'm concerned about the operational side as it relates to the implementation of both the Baker-Tilly study and then how the potential pay classification study may impact future budgets. So I would prefer to divide the question and deal with 2023 and then deal with 2024 at a later date.
Okay, so I'm going to take that as a motion to approve and discuss 2023 rate increase and wait then on 2024. I saw Mr. Force with his hand up. Is that a second?
If that's a motion, I would second
Okay.
it, but I also had a comment.
All right, go ahead.
We don't really know what the operational costs are for the new facility, not yet. And I think that's another reason to hold off on any future rate increases, because we're really not sure what those operational costs are going to be. Hopefully they'll be manageable, and perhaps we won't need a 10% increase down the road. So I would support John's motion.
Okay. Any,
You all right? Okay. I think that's a smart decision at this point. There's a lot of projects right now, from corrosion control to lead service lines to solar to a lot of other projects that I'm hoping will shake out a little bit more clear through 2023. I can't guarantee that because, things have been changing quite a bit and there's just been a lot happening. But I think from month to month, as we get more information in the director's report or through just agenda items, we will bring items forward for either just for information or for consideration if we need direction. So especially on these projects that we know that eventually we're going to have to do or want to do, but we just don't have clarification on those impacts yet, so.
Mr. Jean?
Prior to voting, I see the comparisons of the rates and projections for a family of two and a family of four. It seems like, and I'd rather hedge on the high side, so I'm not saying we should have changed that but a family, an individual uses roughly 8 units as projected here. I thought PSC is going to reestablish that for the water side. It's, the way I remember it, used to be closer to 5 or 6 per person in a household, unless you have teenagers, and that number could be anything. So, but those numbers could be a little high in that rate comparison, or how it is
Sure.
going to be impacting the sewer bills. Hopefully, I'm right and they don't use that much water.
Right.
Okay?
Okay.
Other questions or comments? All right, it seems like we're then ready to vote. As a reminder, we're voting on the proposed sewer rate increase for calendar year 2023 and holding off for more information for 2024. All those in favor can signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that carries. Thank you. Alrighty, we are moving on to item number 5, discussion and possible action for additional funding available through the DNR Principal Forgiveness Loan for fiscal year 2022.
Okay. So as you know, over the last several years, the DNR had a principal forgiveness loan program for private side lead service line replacement. We have been working under that program for the last several years, and every year we'd get a few $100,000 a year to replace private side lead service lines. This was the last year they were going to provide that funding in that manner. And so we ran out of money with the requests that we had for this year. And so because of that, we went and asked the city council to approve $200,000 from ARPA to help cover us for those private side lead services that we could still replace during the construction year, with the thought that if the DNR had received money back at the end of 2022, that they would allocate those funds to us to help cover those costs. That happened. So the DNR has providing us $270,000 additional from the 2022 allocation. And that's what this item is for, to approve that resolution to accept that additional $270,000 of principal forgiveness for lead service line replacement for 2022. Hopefully I covered that.
Right.
Okay.
Any questions or possibly a motion? All right, it looks like we have a motion from Alder Herbst to approve the additional funding through the DNR Principal Loan Forgiveness Loan for fiscal year 2022, and a second by Mr. Jean. Any comments or questions? Mr. Robinson?
For clarification, the resolution is silent on the fiscal year. Do we want to just for tracking purposes put in a reference to the 2022 year?
Yeah, we can do that, John.
Sure.
Thank
I
you.
would move to amend that to,
Okay.
on the,
I'm just staring at our city attorney. Is that something that could be considered housekeeping on a resolution, or do we need to officially amend it?
I would, in the third whereas, right before the final state drinking water loan program, I would just insert the word 2022 in there. I think that would give the clarification.
Put it in the resolution.
In the resolution.
I think that's a good idea.
I would move to
Okay.
amend to insert 2022 before that second
Okay,
state
we
drinking
have-
water loan program in the third whereas.
We have an amendment to clarify the fiscal year. Do I have a second? I have a second by Mr. Jean. I'm assuming there's no questions, so maybe we can we're voting on the amendment right now, approving, adding clarification in the third whereas to tell everyone that this is the 2022 fiscal year where we're getting money through. So all of those in favor can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Now we have the resolution as amended. Any other questions or comments? Alrighty, so all of those in favor of approving additional funding available through the DNR Principal Forgiveness Loan for fiscal year 2022 can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that carries. Thank you very much. We are now on to item number 6, discussion and possible action on the private side lead service line plan implementation beginning 2024.
Staff would like to start working on the implementation of the lead service line replacement plan this year. It's going to take us a full year, really, to get organized and put something together. Again, there's more things evolving as we're moving forward, and so we're going to have to take those into account. We did request, I believe, $3.5 million through the bill program for state fiscal year 2024. Again, for the next fiscal year for the state, we'll apply for more, but as that becomes available. There's a lot to this plan. We're finalizing the plan with CDM Smith now and Clark Dietz, and so we will bring that final plan back to the commission in pretty short order, and we continue to work on the inventory as we move forward as well. And there's another item on the agenda too, so hopefully we can get some additional technical assistance as we move forward. But I guess if the commission's okay with us moving forward with the idea that this plan will be implemented in 2024, and as pieces of the plan need to be approved by the commission, as we move forward, we'll bring those back to you for decisions.
Questions or comments? Mr. Force?
In the report dated February 7th, you say that at the last commission meeting, the staff was given direction to look at performing a pilot LSLR
Nope.
in 2023 with no funding. Staff's discussed this to be best to be focused on preparing full LSRP for 2024. Does that mean we are not going to do the pilot?
No, I just don't think that we have time to initiate proper communication to try to, and without funding, I don't see how we get buy-in from residents telling them to fully fund replacement on their side.
One of the appealing features, in my view, of the pilot study was that we would really put to test a communications program with the residents in that area and learn some valuable lessons, I thought, in how to communicate the need for lead service line replacement and hopefully obtain their buy-in so that there wasn't a pushback from homeowners. I've already received a number of calls, as other members of the commission may have, from folks who don't want to do this for various reasons. And I thought that the pilot program would perhaps teach us some lessons about communication and feedback and how to handle those situations. So I'm a little disappointed that we're not going to do it.
I guess, is it your wish that we do that, just trying to reach out and communicate with those residents? Because I mean, as far as the actual replacement, it's going to be 100% their decision. I mean, we can prepare information to provide to them. We can try to reach out to them. I don't think if there's any incentive for them to do it, I don't believe that they're going to do it. But, you know, I don't want to not do it if it's the commission's wish to move ahead with something. I just would need to know exactly what that is. So if you want us to communicate to the individuals on that street with some education materials, with trying to encourage them to do it on their own, I don't know how that will go, but.
Well, just a final comment. My understanding, and I may have missed something here, was that the pilot LSLR would involve replacing lead service lines in a selected section of the city where that need was great, and that we would learn a great deal about how to deal with homeowners and learn about the technology of replacing the lead service line. So it seemed like a good idea to me to have a pilot study where we learned a number of things before we launch into a full-scale program. That's my thinking, and it may not be shared by others. I understand that.
Mr. Robinson.
Well, I share some of Jim's concerns in terms of rolling it out, but again, I think that if you look at where they've had success, and I looked at Green Bay, where they had a highly collaborative outreach program involving the health department, community organizations, and others, I think that the pilot gives you the opportunity to begin working on that collaboration in education. I am a little bit concerned about workload, given the fact that we've got some staff shortages, but I also understand the need to control your message and the facts surrounding your message and making sure that they get out there in a timely manner so we don't get the unintended pushback from people that don't fully understand why we're doing things. So I would be open to delaying it, but I also think that there's a strong need for us to develop a communication strategy relative to lead service lines going forward, I think, which is what Jim's, I think one of your big concerns is that to make sure that we can manage the message only from the perspective of making sure that we're ahead of it and we're prepared to provide the information in a factual manner, whether it be on the website and other forms of communication with those property owners along the road. So I would defer to staff, but I would hope that while I could go along with deferring the pilot, I would have an expectation that somehow we develop that communication policy in a communication education policy with the community.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key pieces of the lead service line replacement plan that isn't fully, complete yet. And so, and that's where I just get concerned about the timeline, right? Because our construction projects will begin in April, May, and we're not there yet. We're not ready to begin this communication. And then we also don't have funding. We won't know until summer. But as we finalize that replacement plan, we will begin to work with the health department as well as other agencies within the city that can help us get the message out for all areas within the city.
Alder Herbst and then Mr. Robinson.
I just would agree with Eric that we have no time to do this year with all the other projects, but I really do feel that we need to take the time rather than to do something haphazardly and look like we have egg on our face after a while. So I'm in favor of taking the time to really research everything that we need to do and end up doing the job that Wausau is noted for, doing everything that they've been to the best of their ability. Thank you.
Mr. Robinson.
So I was going to ask the esteemed mayor, who was a panelist in Washington DC talking about lead service lines, are there technical resources and expertise that we can leverage from EPA? And I know that Secretary Payne was also there from the DNR that can help us in our messaging and the ability to adopt best management practices that have been applied in other communities in order to help with getting the message out.
Right, that was something I was going to bring up as part of this discussion as well. So we do know that there is going to be technical expertise available to us. Our governor has signed on to the lead service line acceleration program that the White House is pushing. So that's good news for us because we've also decided that that's what we want to do. And we don't know what that technical expertise looks like just yet. I know that I don't know that the state necessarily knows yet either, but I can promise you I've been bothering them. I know that Eric's been bothering them in the best possible way because we're excited to get this going. But I do think it will be extremely important that we're communicating correctly in the language that people use. I think that we probably want to make sure we have professional communicators on board with this plan. You know, a lot of the folks I talked to in DC were talking about how they just hired groups of people to go door to door to knock, and that's how they were able to get this done. But also having that funding behind it is really important, especially in some neighborhoods where they need a little extra support. So yes, I hope to have more information. I was hoping we'd have more information right now, but unfortunately, sometimes you get to wait. Mr. Force.
Having spent a good portion of my life in communications, just a couple of things. You can't do something before you communicate what you're going to do. And I think the city at times is guilty of that. So item number one, you need a communications plan before you implement the process of replacing lead lines. The second thing is, I would be wary of having a group of professionals come in and develop a communications plan without substantial input from the folks who are going to be affected by the activity. That is the residents along the street who are going to have their yards torn up and their decks moved and their sidewalks torn up and replaced. So the communications plan has to be developed with them involved. If you do it otherwise, you're going to get pushback, and it's going to be a very slow slog to get this done. So those 2 points, that's all I would say.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Did we have a motion on this one?
Do we need one on this one?
Okay. Motion by Alder Herbst. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Jean. So, Mr. Robinson, quizzical look.
I'm looking, what is the motion?
To approve the private side lead service line plan implementation beginning in 2024. Mr. Robinson.
Could Eric, what's a reasonable time frame for developing a time frame, for dealing with some of these issues? So if we were to task you if we gave you the go-ahead today and it would ask you that within 60 days, can you give us a time frame for when we could address certain issues? So we don't get into a situation that Jim had laid out
Yeah.
where we're there and we haven't developed that communication plan.
Yeah, I would say that at this point, if I could get it by March, we will, but I would say a realistic time frame is to bring the communication plan for comment back to you in April, at the April meeting, along with the rest of the lead service line replacement plan, along with any inventory that we have up to date at that point. Yeah.
Could we dedicate a good portion of that meeting then for a thorough evaluation of where we are, revisiting the Clark Dietz study or the CH, the various studies that we've had done, and then move forward with it? I would be supportive with that understanding.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm perfectly fine with that.
Mr. Force?
And I would be okay with it if we're going to develop a communications plan with citizen, taxpayer, homeowner input. I think that's an important part of it, and I would support what we're doing if I can be sure that that input will be part of the plan.
I'm seeing everyone nodding their head in agreement, so. All right, are we good moving forward? All right, all of those in favor of approving the private side lead service line plan implementation, beginning in 2024, can signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Okay, that passes. We will talk about this again in April, if not sooner. We're now moving on to item number 7, discussion and possible action requesting Public Service Commission permission to use user rates for private side lead service line replacements.
So as you know, we've discussed this before. In order to use revenue rates to replace private side lead services, we need formal approval by the PSC. And that's going to take some time, and it requires a formal request. I think one of the things that I want to make sure that you understand is if you say that, let's go ahead and get this approval, doesn't mean that you have to use this, for replacement of private side lead service lines. It just leaves the opportunity open, so it won't hold anything up later on as far as a potential funding source.
Mr. Force?
Eric, isn't this what Madison did? And are there other communities in Wisconsin that have done this? But it requires a special ruling of some kind. Maybe you're not aware, right?
Right, I don't know. There are other communities that are doing this because they will allow you to use up to to pay for up to 50% of the service line replacement with user rates. Without this approval, you can't use your revenue rates.
I think that's what Madison did, and it was a key to their success.
Okay.
Scott, I don't know, you have more detail than I do on that?
There are several communities that have
Yeah.
done that. I mean, we can bring back a list, but I know there's probably 10 or 15 offhand.
Okay. Any other questions or possibly a motion? Hey, Mr. Jean? Yeah.
I will so move that we make an application with PSC to use funds for possible support of the replacement of the private side.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second? I have a second from Alder Herbst. Further discussion? Anyone? All right, all of those in favor of requesting the Public Service Commission's permission to use user rates for private side lead service line replacements can signify by saying aye. Excuse me. And any opposed? All right, thank you very much. We are now on to item number 8, discussion and possible action on participating in the United States Environmental Protection Agency's lead service line replacement accelerators community initiative. This is, I guess, the official resolution in order for us to participate in the project. Do you have any?
I would just say that I had a conversation with the DNR, and so did Scott. They didn't have a lot of details about this. The understanding is that the Environmental Protection Agency is going to hire, there's 4 states that are participating in this. Wisconsin is one of them. The DNR had reached out to communities who have been proactive with lead service line replacement, and we've been one of them. And so they were going to give, Wausau is one of their recommendations to be able to use this technical assistance program. The EPA is going to hire an engineering firm, a technical firm, to provide technical assistance to a certain number of communities within Wisconsin. We don't know who that firm is.
Mr. Force.
Is there a financial impact to us?
There is not that I am aware of, that this is all technical assistance funded by the EPA.
Okay. I would move I'm not sure what the wording should be here, but we
Approve participation?
approve participation in the lead service line replacement accelerator program.
All right, we have a motion and I have a second by Mr. Robinson. Any further discussion? Alrighty, all of those in favor of participating in the United States Environmental Protection Agency's Lead Service Line Replacement Accelerator Community Initiative can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. We are now on to item number 9, discussion on the 5-year capital improvement project plan and user rates.
So through discussions over the last couple of months at the commission, I had heard from a couple of you that trying to understand what is reflected in the rate increases and what is not. So I tried to go through the information and provide you what is included on our 5-year capital plan in the proposed rate increases and what so far has not been included in those projected rate increases that will need to be considered at a later date. And so I started with this. If you want more information, or I do believe that we'll be working with Ellers later on again this year to have a better understanding where kind of we're at with revenues, usage, and anything proposed for 2024, if anything at that point. So, but this is, I tried to break this down the best I could. You know, rather than looking at the capital sheets and then looking at the Ellers and trying to look at multiple documents. So I don't know if there's something else you would like to see.
Mr. Robinson.
What, two things, Eric, do we have the corrosion control implementation in here?
I have it down below. We had some of the CCT, the engineering that we're doing on it right now, but we didn't have costs for the lead service line loops, the testing, additional engineering, you know, all the specifics. We're just getting into that now. The plant is now online, so I believe our lead service line loops, if we purchase them, the skids are going to cost us about $150,000. And then we don't have a testing plan yet from the established with the DNR yet. So I don't know what our testing costs and requirements are going to be at this point. So I don't know what those costs are going to be.
Is there a way for us to guesstimate what those costs might be in future years? Because when I look at this, it kind of, you've got the 2 years of expenditures in this, the corrosion control study, and then it stops, and there's obviously an implementation component.
Right.
Because we're going into the future, it would just be nice if we could reflect a guesstimate of what those costs might be going forward. And the second question would be relative to, while we've identified costs, including the granular activated carbon system, we've already received some funding from EPA. Is there a way for us to potentially look at some offsets to the capital cost in terms of potential grant funding to give us a net impact? If we're looking at this for rate purposes, it might be helpful to know if there are bipartisan infrastructure law or Inflation Reduction Act or ARPA dollars or other funding sources through the states or the federal government that might help offset those costs to allow for a more meaningful discussion about what the net impact is on rates.
I mean, I can put the list together of potential funding sources if that's what you're asking. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
I think that would
Certainly
be
can.
extremely helpful for us, because otherwise you're looking at the worst case scenario, and if there are funding, many of these are mandates, and there are some funding sources associated with some of them, and understanding that they are guesstimates,
Correct, yep. Yeah, absolutely, I can include that on this spreadsheet and bring it back.
Mr. Force?
Eric, as I look at this, I see capital costs included in the 2023 rate case. For example, $1,270,000 for 2023 and $19,008,000 for 2024. That includes the big chunk of it for that granular carbon PFAS removal system. And then down below, expected cost increases not included in the proposed rate increase. I mean, does that imply that the rate increase that we're proposing is not going to be adequate to cover additional costs that we expect?
Well, I think the challenge here is that we're anticipating worst-case scenario on the anticipated rate increase, right? So if we're specifically looking at drinking water, we're looking at a 65% rate increase, right? So, and that's anticipating that we are going to borrow $17 million for the GAC, that, you know, but we've applied for other funding for principal forgiveness loan for both state fiscal year 2023, 2024, emerging contaminant funds. We've applied for all of those, but we don't know if we're getting them yet. So the idea is that, you know, if we do get some of those, then that rate increase, we may not need another rate increase to do this other work. But what I'm saying is that when Ellers prepared that rate case in December and submitted it to the PSC, these projects that are down below were, and these costs were not included in that 65% rate increase.
Okay, good explanation. We continue to talk about applications for funding from various sources, but I never hear about when are we going to know or when our decision's going to be made by the funding sources. Are we continuing to apply and hope that we'll get some response next month or the next quarter or next year? I don't know when we're going to know whether
Yeah.
we're going to get anything.
It's a good question, Jim. We're anticipating that the Safe Drinking Water Loan Program will come out with their decision in June or around that time frame. The emerging contaminants, I'm not sure if that will be earlier, the same time frame through the DNR, but we're anticipating late spring or early summer for answers on these. The only one that we've had verification from was Senator Baldwin's office with that special project funding of about $1.6 million.
More questions or comments? Otherwise, I'm sure we'll be revisiting this. Thanks. Last up is item number 10, discussion and possible action on revisions to the proposed organizational chart for the utility.
So I had prepared the organizational chart with proposed revisions based on Baker Tilly's recommendations. This is a draft currently right now. And so I thought it might be beneficial for, we read the report, we saw the report, but to see how that would impact the utility itself on both the water and the wastewater side. If the commission has no objections, this is going to be kind of our starting point. This is a multi-year implementation, so this is not something that is going to be implemented in a year or two. This is over the course of years. And so I will be working with HR, James, on this, making sure that I'm doing things properly, that getting his recommendations for this as well. But yeah, I wanted to bring this forward for discussion for if you think any changes, if I don't, more of a consensus type that this is really the start of further discussions to come, so.
Mr. Robinson, I see you reaching for the mic.
Well, thank you, and, I appreciate having it laid out, but I think what I'd like to see is sort of a rough idea of an implementation plan with costs.
Sure.
And I understand that, it's a dynamic document, we don't know what the classifications are, but we can, we have, again, some ability to ballpark the numbers and
Sure.
and get something in there, but I think that would be extremely helpful, because I'm not sure this is in the wants versus needs, but I think it would help us understand. I think it's probably more the needs than the wants,
For sure.
and just give us a better understanding of how it might impact us, so we can then look at it in the context of the 5-year plan and other priorities within the utility.
Yeah, and I have some of that drafted with the timing. The fiscal impacts I'll have to get with finance, and so I don't know if those will come together or just different times, but that information will come forward as we move forward, so, yep.
Anyone else with Mr. Force?
Yeah, I just have to observe that I think this is great. I agree these positions are needed. We heard that from the consultant last week. But I continue to struggle with the concept that we're really having a hard time finding people to work for us. So,
I think as we work through too, we're going to try to find some solutions for that as well, and some options, so we'll bring those forward as well.
Anything else? Mr. Jean?
If we're done with that item, I just want to be sure that the action that we took under item 4 with regard to the sewer rate increase, is this, I know it has to go through the council, or I recall that it has to go through the council, is that correct?
We just talked about this, I think, if there was opposition.
Correct.
Yeah.
The ordinance is delegated to the commission to be able to set rates. And in the past, it went through council because the ordinance carried the rates. And so there was an ordinance change or an amendment every time. And so if the city council, wants to make any changes or has anything, then it would go to them. But it doesn't have to go through resolution to council. I know I had talked with Ann about this as well.
Okay,
So-
I wasn't sure how that was being handled. I know that it seemed like we have more authority, and
Right.
I wanted it go in effect as soon as possible. I mean, not immediate, but so there's no hiccups that we have to come back at another meeting, is what I'm saying.
Right. I think the goal is by April 1st was what we were looking at. Yep.
Okay. All right. I guess the last item on our agenda is I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
could I make one comment before that, Mayor?
Maybe.
Maybe.
Well,
I-
I just want to be mindful of the open meetings and all of that,
Yeah.
so.
The fact that we had no comments from the audience at the public hearing today, we did have one email correspondence, and I think somehow the city should express appreciation to that person, perhaps you already have, for coming forward and expressing their viewpoint.
Thank you. All right, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. I have a motion by Alder Herbst and a second by Mr. Jean. All in favor can signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you.